Hi there, I'm Lorraine. After our family reunion, I got home, opened my banking app, and everything was gone. Not stolen by strangers. My own father took it. When I confronted him, he just shrugged and said, "We needed it." But that wasn't the worst part. Turns out, this wasn't a one-time mistake. It was years of silent manipulation, fake emergencies, loans in my name, even teaching my niece to lie. And for the longest time I stayed quiet, because they were family. But now I wonder, how many times did I mistake love for loyalty? The smell of charcoal and overcooked ribs still clung to my shirt as I stepped out of my parents' house and into the thick Boise heat. It was that kind of family reunion, the kind where everyone hugs too hard, asks too much, and gives too little. My mom had spent the afternoon gliding around with her signature wine glass like it was a trophy, pretending everyone loved each other. My dad, Ricky, mostly sat with the TV on mute, occasionally grunting out his opinion about politics or the price of gas. And Darlene? She was in rare form. "You probably make six figures now, right?" she blurted between bites of potato salad. "God must be nice." I laughed it off because that's what I always do. That's what keeps the peace. But something about the way she said it, sharp, loud, as if she wanted the whole backyard to hear, stuck in my chest like a splinter. By the time I got to my car, I could feel a headache building right behind my eyes. My father gave me a half-hearted wave and said, "Drive safe, Lorraine. Don't forget you're the lucky one in this family." I didn't respond. I just smiled tight and started the engine. On the drive home, the sky was still glowing from the last stretch of sunset, but the heat hadn't let up. The air conditioning felt like a blessing, but my mind wouldn't shut off. I kept hearing his voice. "You're the lucky one." As if luck had anything to do with why I was the only one who hadn't borrowed money, tanked their credit, or moved back in with our parents after 40. I got home just after 8:30, kicked off my shoes, tossed my purse on the kitchen counter, and instinctively opened my laptop. Checking my account balance had become second nature, a mix of anxiety and habit after a lifetime of being the responsible one. I wasn't prepared for what I saw. The screen loaded. My checking account showed $87.16. I blinked, hit refresh, same number. Yesterday, I had just over $14,000 in there. I had transferred a bonus check from work. I remembered double-checking the deposit. I refreshed the page again. Still $87.16. My hand started to tremble. I opened the transaction history. 3 large transfers had gone through since Friday, each for thousands, and all originating from a familiar IP address. My parents' Wi-Fi, the same one I had connected to during the reunion. A chill ran down my spine. My fingers hovered over the trackpad as if they could reverse it by pausing, as if staring long enough might bring the money back. My breath got shallow. I muttered to myself, "No, no way, he wouldn't, not Dad." But deep down, something cracked, like a curtain finally lifting. The signs had always been there. A week before the reunion, Darlene had called, voice shaking and tearful. "Lori, I hate asking, but the girls need supplies for school. I'm tapped out. Just $300, please?" I wired it to her within 10 minutes. 2 days later, she posted a selfie on Instagram, nails freshly done, holding a mimosa. Self-care Sunday. Another post showed a brunch spread that could have fed a family of 5. The caption said, "Treat yourself." I remembered staring at my phone, a pit forming in my stomach. But I didn't say anything. I told myself maybe someone else paid. Maybe she deserved a break. But now the pieces were rearranging themselves. I sat at my dining table staring at the screen. My apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the fridge and the blood rushing in my ears. I hadn't even taken off my jacket. I scrolled through old mental files, memories I had buried under politeness. The time I covered her rent, just for 1 month. The time Dad's battery died, and I handed over $200 without blinking. The time Mom said, "You've always been good with money. Not everyone's like that." No one asked. They just assumed I'd help, that I should help, that I existed to help. And suddenly, that $87.16 meant something more than missing money. It meant they never saw me. Not really. I whispered aloud, "They didn't even ask." I stared at the balance again. No one had called to warn me. No one had said, "Hey, we're in a bind." No one even pretended this was a shared decision. Just 3 emptying clicks, and the life I'd been quietly building drained out of me. I stood slowly, grabbed my coat again. My body moved before my brain did. I didn't call, I didn't text. I just grabbed my keys and walked out. I was going back. Tonight. The drive back to my parents' house was short, just under 20 minutes. But it felt longer under the weight of everything I couldn't yet explain. Streetlights flickered above me as I turned into their quiet neighborhood. I passed the same white picket fences, the same trimmed hedges, and it hit me how many times I'd made this same drive. Birthdays, holidays, emergencies that weren't mine. This time, it was me who needed answers. The porch light was still on when I pulled into the driveway. Their living room window glowed with a soft bluish hue. Dad probably watching the news with the volume too low to hear anything. I rang the bell once. Pamela opened the door, wine glass still in hand, her eyebrows raised, but her tone light. "Well, that was fast. Did you forget something, sweetheart?" "No," I said, stepping inside. "We need to talk, now." The house smelled like warm leftovers and fabric softener. Familiar, disarming. That was their trick. Make everything look normal on the outside, so you feel crazy for knowing it's not. Ricky barely turned his head from the couch. Darlene was stretched out on the armchair, scrolling on her phone like this was any other Sunday night. I didn't sit down. I stood in the middle of the room and said it. "My bank account is empty. Gone. All of it." Ricky didn't blink. Darlene didn't pause. Pamela frowned, tilted her head. "Oh, Lorraine, don't be so dramatic." I stared at her. "I'm not being dramatic, I'm being robbed." That got Ricky's attention. He took a sip of his beer and finally looked at me. "We needed it." I blinked. Darlene sighed like I had just inconvenienced her. "You're seriously going to throw a fit over money? You don't have a mortgage, no kids, no one depending on you." Pamela chimed in gently. "They were struggling, honey. Sometimes things happen. We didn't want to ask." "You didn't ask," I snapped. "You just took." Ricky shrugged, like that made sense. "You've always helped before. What's different now?" I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. "I helped because I chose to, not because you stole from me." "You're blowing this out of proportion," Darlene said, finally setting her phone down. "It's not like we ran off to Vegas. We paid bills, groceries, rent, survival." Pamela sat on the edge of the recliner and sighed, like I'd accused her of something unthinkable. "It's just money, Lorraine." "No," I said, voice low. "It's trust, and you broke it." The room went quiet for a beat too long. Then Ricky said, "You didn't say we couldn't." I stared at him, blinking hard. "Because I didn't know I had to." Darlene rolled her eyes. "Maybe next time don't leave your login info open on the family computer. I mean, that's kind of on you." There it was, that casual cruelty, that entitlement dressed up like logic. I glanced around the room. No one looked ashamed, no one apologized. They just looked annoyed, like I was making things uncomfortable for daring to care that they emptied my savings. They'd taken the money. Now they wanted to take the narrative, too. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. Instead, I turned, grabbed my purse, and walked to the door. Ricky called after me. "So that's it? You're just leaving?" I didn't even glance back. "This isn't a misunderstanding," I said. "It's theft." And none of them tried to stop me. I stepped into the night air, the silence louder than any argument. As I walked to my car, the question looped in my head like a song I couldn't turn off. How long have they seen me as their backup plan? By the time I got home, the city had already gone quiet. Boise after dark was always oddly still, like it was trying to keep its secrets. I parked in the usual spot, entered the building, and rode the elevator in silence. It was close to 11 p.m. when I walked into my apartment and locked the door behind me. I didn't even turn on the lights. I dropped my purse on the counter, kicked off my shoes, and stood in the middle of my kitchen with a blank stare. I wasn't tired. I wasn't even angry, not yet. I just needed silence, and it gave me too much. After a few minutes, I opened my laptop, not really knowing why. Maybe part instinct, part compulsion. The screen lit up, still open to my bank dashboard from earlier. $87.16. It hadn't changed. Of course it hadn't. I minimized the tab and opened my email. Search, payment confirmation. 100 results flooded the inbox. Rent payments, Zelle transfers, Amazon orders I never made, flights I never took. I began scrolling, and the deeper I went, the more a pattern started to emerge. And then I found it. 2 years ago. A collection notice from a credit card company I didn't recognize. I had assumed it was junk back then and tossed it. But tonight, I clicked into the details. The card was opened in my name, my address. But the purchases didn't match my life. Luxury candles, streaming services I never used, grocery delivery from a zip code across town, and one of the first charges? A new iPad, shipped to Darlene's apartment. I remembered calling the company trying to dispute the account. The rep asked if I'd authorized the application. No, I said. I never applied for this. The investigation traced the application IP to one address, my parents' house. The same IP that drained my checking account last weekend. I confronted Darlene. She didn't even deny it. It was a temporary thing, she'd said, sipping iced coffee like this was just another Tuesday. You weren't even using your credit. I figured it wouldn't hurt anything. I paid the balance to shut it down. Then I buried it, like always. Back then, I told myself it was a fluke, a bad judgment call. Family does stupid things sometimes. But now I wasn't so sure. I sat down slowly, pulled my hoodie over my knees, and clicked into my photo folder titled Family. Scrolling through birthdays, holidays, blurry selfies from over the years, I remembered the second hit. 6 months ago, a phone call at midnight. Darlene sobbing. Lori, it's Addison. She's really sick. Pneumonia. I don't have enough to cover the urgent care copay. Please. I'd sent $600 that night. No hesitation. 3 days later, Addison posted a TikTok from Lake Tahoe, dancing in a hotel robe, spinning in circles with her cousin by the pool. I called Darlene and asked, Wait, was she even sick? Her answer burned into my brain. Oh my God, you're always so suspicious. We just needed a break. Sorry we didn't clear it with you, Miss IRS. I didn't respond. I didn't demand it back. I just went quiet again. I don't know what was worse, that she lied or that I had believed her so easily. I looked around my apartment. The place felt smaller now, like the walls were closing in with every memory I had tried to forget. I opened a blank spreadsheet. Category, rent paid for others. Amount, $800. Category, Darlene's car battery. Amount, $250. Category, emergency, school supplies. Amount, $300. I kept typing. Cell phone bills, surprise birthday parties, gift cards, vet bills that weren't mine. I stared at the total. I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear. This had never been about one moment. It had never been about a single betrayal. It was a system. A quiet, manipulative running tab no one thought I'd ever question. I clicked Save As and typed the file name, Family Debt, Do Not Ignore. I sat back, feeling the weight shift inside my chest. This wasn't just money, it was respect, and they'd taken that too. 2 days passed. I didn't hear a word from them. Not a single text, not a voicemail, no apology, no defense. The silence felt tactical, like they were waiting for me to simmer down and pretend it never happened. But I wasn't the same woman they thought they could wear down. It was Thursday when I printed out every piece of evidence. Bank statements, credit alerts, identity reports. I slid the stack into a clean black folder, then set it on my kitchen table beside my keys. I stared at it for a full minute. It felt heavier than it was, like it carried every favor I never agreed to, every dollar I never offered, every time they mistook me for a doormat. By 6:45 that evening, I was parking across the street from my parents' house. I didn't pull into the driveway like usual. I wasn't here for dinner. I wasn't here for smiles. I was here for the truth. I stepped out, folder tucked under my arm. The grass was still damp from afternoon sprinklers. A breeze rattled the wind chimes hanging by their porch. I rang the bell once. Pamela answered, face drawn and unsure. You didn't say you were coming, she murmured. I'm not here to eat. She stepped aside without asking anything more. Ricky sat on the couch, reclined with a soda in hand. ESPN was playing at low volume. Darlene was in the corner chair, legs curled beneath her, scrolling like always. I didn't bother with greetings. I dropped the folder on the coffee table. The slap of it hitting the surface made Ricky flinch. "What's that?" he asked. "Proof," I said. "And the last time I'll explain anything." He chuckled, more annoyance than humor. "You're still on about that account?" "No," I replied calmly. "Now it's about all of them." I opened the folder and pulled the first page free. "Remember this? You co-signed a personal loan 18 months ago using my name. I didn't sign this." Ricky blinked. "You left your social on that tax form. I needed it. Fast. So you committed fraud and used my identity without asking." He didn't respond. Pamela stood in the doorway, arms crossed tightly. Her eyes said it all. She'd known. "We helped you," Ricky said. "We put food on your plate when you were in school. Paid for your books. You think all that came free?" "I've repaid you 10 times over," I snapped. "With silence. With rent when you were short. With gifts you never earned. You used me because I didn't fight back." Darlene finally looked up. "Oh, please. This whole victim act is exhausting. You act like we stole your soul." "No," I said, my voice sharp. "You stole something far more practical. My name, my future, my peace of mind." Ricky waved me off. "Don't act like you're some saint. We all do what we have to for family." I held up another document, co-signature verification. "I'm giving you 48 hours to fix this with the bank. Remove my name. Own it, or I report it." "You wouldn't," Pamela whispered. I met her gaze. "You want to bet on that?" Darlene stood, mouth twisting. "You're being cold, heartless even. What happened to us looking out for each other?" "What happened," I said, stepping toward the door, "is that you thought looking out for each other meant I never got to look out for myself." I grabbed the folder, tucked it under my arm again. Ricky tried one last time. "So what now? You gonna take your own family to court?" "If you ever use my name again," I said flatly, "I'll use yours. In court. On paper. On the record." No one spoke. As I pulled the front door open, I didn't look back. "You think guilt's going to keep me quiet?" I said loud enough to echo down the hallway. "Try me." Then I left, the door slamming shut behind me, not in rage, but in resolve. It had been a quiet week. Too quiet. No emails, no voicemails, no knocks at the door. I thought maybe, just maybe, they were letting it go. But on Saturday night, at exactly 8:03 p.m., a text lit up my phone from Pamela. "Lunch at 1 tomorrow. Just us. Let's talk like family." "Just us" had always been code for, "Let's sweep this under the rug without outsiders watching." I should have ignored it. But part of me needed to hear what their next excuse would be. So I charged my laptop, printed 3 things, and placed them in a manila envelope. Not as evidence. Not anymore. As closure. Sunday was warm, too warm for anything serious to happen, and yet, there I was, walking up the steps of my parents' porch at 12:59 p.m., envelope in hand, notepad of patience completely empty. The front door creaked open before I could knock. Pamela stood there in her apron, her hair curled like it was Easter brunch. "You came," she said, her smile stiff. "I did." The dining table was already set. 4 places. I guess just us meant them plus me again. Ricky looked up from his chair and gave me a small nod, like we were meeting for a board meeting instead of a reckoning. Darlene didn't say anything, just sipped from a glass of sweet tea, tapping her acrylics against the stem. I didn't sit. "We thought this would be a chance to reset," Pamela began, placing a dish of rolls in the center of the table, "to clear the air." "Clear it or twist it?" I asked. Ricky leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Look, none of us handled things perfectly, but dragging this out? It's just hurting everyone, especially you." "Hurting me?" I said. "You emptied my account and used my identity, but I'm the one making it worse?" "We're trying to move on," Pamela added, like this was a family disagreement over a burnt casserole and not financial fraud. Darlene finally spoke. "We don't want to fight, Lorraine. What's done is done. Let's not let money come between us." That was their version of peace. No apology, no ownership, just pressure to pretend. I sat down slowly, placing the envelope on my plate like it was part of the setting. "Funny you say that," I said, "because I ran into Aunt Debbie yesterday at the grocery store. She asked if I was still being as generous as always. Pamela's smile cracked for half a second. She said, I continued, that you told her I offered to cover Darlene's bills, that I was just being my usual big-hearted self. Pamela didn't respond. I pulled out the printout and slid it across the table. A screenshot. A message thread from her phone. One she hadn't deleted from the cloud. Her text to Aunt Debbie, dated 2 days after I confronted them. She's overreacting. She offered to help. It wasn't like we took it without her knowing. Silence dropped like a curtain. I looked at all of them. Let me be clear, I said. I didn't offer anything. You stole from me, and now you're lying to other people about it, to protect your image. Darlene scoffed. You're blowing this way out of proportion. I turned to her. No, you just got too comfortable thinking I'd never say anything. I stood. This is your last chance. After today, I go public. I go legal. I go wherever I need to so this doesn't happen again, to me or anyone else. I pulled a sealed envelope from my purse and set it on the table. The name of my attorney printed neatly in the return address corner. A cease and desist, I said, effective immediately. Pamela's hand hovered above it, but she didn't touch it. Ricky leaned forward like he might speak, then didn't. I stepped back from the table. No more backdoor conversations, no more stories to family, no more guilt trips. No one stopped me. I left the roast untouched, the tea full, the table full of people who had run out of lies they could hide behind. I didn't even turn around when the door shut behind me. I just kept walking down the front steps, onto the driveway, and back into my car. I sat there for a while, staring out the windshield, my hands motionless on the steering wheel. Not because I was unsure of what I'd done, because I wasn't, but because the silence afterward hurt more than I'd expected. The engine clicked softly as it cooled, a mocking quiet. They didn't chase me. They didn't yell. They didn't apologize. Just sat there, stunned, like I'd done something cruel. I drove home, showered, and let the rest of the evening pass without turning on the TV or checking my phone. The roast smell still clung to my clothes, like fake comfort. I tossed everything into the laundry basket, locked the apartment door behind me, and for once, I didn't dream at all. The next morning, I made coffee and opened my laptop. Nothing from them. No missed calls. Just a lingering bitter taste in my mouth and the sound of my email refreshing. I tried to move on with my day. I really did. I cleaned my desk, organized files, even watered the succulents I usually forgot about. But the stillness was loud and heavy. By late afternoon, I agreed to watch Addison, Darlene's daughter, for a couple hours while she met with someone from her new job agency. Addison was dropped off with her usual hug and tablet in hand. She's all yours, Darlene chirped from the hallway. Thanks, sis. Sis. The word landed differently now. While Addison colored quietly at my kitchen table, I sat beside her to check the weather on her tablet. Just for a moment. The screen was already unlocked. A messenger window blinked in the background. Notifications piled in the corner. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. The group chat name was Carver Core. It had every name you'd expect: Darlene, Pamela, Ricky, even a cousin or two. At first it was family jokes, memes, baby photos. Then a thread caught my eye. Darlene. She's seriously lost it, like paranoid level nuts. Pamela. She was always sensitive. This is just her being dramatic again. Ricky. Girl gets a good job and thinks she's Queen of Idaho. We should have never let her go to college. And then, laughing emojis. From all of them. I sat frozen, scrolling. The messages dated back weeks. Weeks of mockery, while I was breaking inside trying to understand what I'd done wrong. Screenshots. I took them all, quietly, deliberately. My fingers didn't even shake. I locked the tablet and handed it back to Addison, who smiled like nothing in the world was wrong. They're not who you think they are, I whispered to myself. That evening, I made an appointment. The next morning, I sat across from my lawyer in his downtown office. His glasses rested on the edge of his nose as he read through the documents I handed him. The unauthorized loan, the group chat screenshots, the fake gifts they told people I'd offered. He looked up, brows raised. You're ready to move forward? I nodded. No more warnings. Draft everything. And the scope? He asked. All of them. Ricky, Pamela, Darlene. I want every single name tied to this mess addressed. Fraud, identity misuse, emotional coercion, financial abuse. He closed the folder, leaned back in his chair, and said the first calm thing I'd heard in weeks. You have a case, and it's airtight. As I stepped out of the building, the early afternoon sun hit me hard. It was too bright for the mood I was in. I stood there for a moment, letting the warmth sting. My phone buzzed. One new text, from Darlene. Did you seriously just subpoena Mom? I stared at the screen for a moment, then turned the phone off without replying. I walked down the street and didn't look back. It was 3 days after I walked out of my lawyer's office when the knock came. I wasn't expecting company. I wasn't expecting her. Addison stood at my door, backpack slung over one shoulder, her curls pulled into a messy ponytail, one shoelace dragging behind her. Hi, Aunt Lorraine, she chirped. Mom said I'm sleeping over tonight. I blinked. Darlene hadn't texted, hadn't called, just dropped her off. Again. Did she say when she'd be back? Nope, Addison said brightly. She said I could stay as long as you want me. It wasn't the first time Darlene treated me like unpaid childcare, but this time felt different. Strategic. Like she knew I'd be less likely to take legal steps while babysitting her daughter. I let Addison in. We baked cookies. Watched reruns of The Great British Bake Off. She giggled every time a contestant dropped something. For a moment, it almost felt normal, until it didn't. She held up her tablet while licking a spoon and said casually, Mom said not to tell you about the iPad. My hand paused over the cookie tray. What do you mean? She said Grandma bought it. But really, Mom got it with the card she keeps hidden. The one she said came from you. My heart stopped. She also said not to talk about my new phone, Addison added, licking frosting from her finger. Mom said it's better if you think it's a gift. I stared at her, at that sweet, honest face, and felt my stomach twist. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about shaping a child into a mirror of her mother's lies. That night, when Addison fell asleep on my couch with crumbs on her shirt and Frozen still playing softly in the background, I stood in the kitchen staring at the ceiling. Darlene wasn't just reckless. She was rewriting her daughter's sense of right and wrong. The next morning, I drove straight to my mother's house. Pamela answered the door, surprised to see me. Before she could speak, I said, Is Darlene here? She hesitated. She's in the kitchen. I walked in without waiting for permission. Darlene sat at the counter, sipping coffee like nothing was wrong. I know what you told Addison. She didn't flinch. What are you talking about? About the iPad, the phone, the credit card. You made her lie to me. Her eyes narrowed. She doesn't know how to keep her mouth shut, does she? I stepped closer. She's 10, Darlene. She's not your shield. She's not your cover story. You're teaching her that lying is how you survive. You're poisoning her. Don't bring my kid into this, she snapped, voice sharp and low. You brought her in the moment you dragged her into your web of lies. Pamela stepped between us, hands raised. Girls, this isn't helping anything. I turned to her. It should help, but you're still pretending this isn't serious. Ricky emerged from the hallway, already defensive. This is all going too far. You're breaking this family over some cash and bad choices. You don't get to use the word family, I said, shaking. Not after what you did with my name. Not after you laughed at me behind my back. Not after Darlene weaponized her own daughter. Pamela's voice cracked. Lorraine, this is family. No, I said, stepping back, voice cold and steady. This is abuse, and I'm done pretending it's not. I handed Pamela a document, another notice. Final. Legal. Binding. This was filed 2 days ago. All 3 of you are named. What happens next is no longer my decision. It's in the court's hands. Darlene's face paled for the first time. I swear you're acting like we killed someone, she whispered. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. As I turned to leave, I looked back at her one last time. If they won't stop you, I said, the court will. She didn't move. Neither did Pamela. Ricky folded his arms, but for once said nothing. And as I stepped out into the cold morning air, I realized something powerful. They weren't scared of losing me. Until now. The quiet didn't arrive with fireworks or fanfare. It didn't come in the form of an apology, a confrontation, or even a last-ditch effort to guilt me back into place. It just happened. like a light slowly dimming in a room I no longer wanted to be in. It had been 2 weeks since I walked out of my mother's house for what I told myself, what I knew, was the last time. I hadn't packed much, just a duffel bag, my documents, and my dignity, which, up until that moment, had been chipped away piece by piece for years. I didn't slam the door, I didn't look back, I didn't give them the satisfaction of a final argument. I simply left. And then came the silence, not peaceful, not relieving, not at first. It was the kind of silence that presses against your chest in the middle of the night and asks, "What now?" No missed calls. No voicemails laced with that performative hurt my mother was so good at faking. No vague texts from my father pretending like he didn't know why I was upset. Just absence. Like they had collectively decided I no longer existed. I thought I was prepared for backlash, a barrage of accusations, maybe even a visit at work or a letter in the mail accusing me of tearing the family apart. I braced myself for emotional blackmail, for teary, "How could you do this?" messages from my sisters. But the silence? That was something else entirely. It wasn't just quiet. It was calculated. It took me a few days to understand it for what it was, punishment. This was their way of showing me what life without them looked like, their way of reminding me who had the power. But what they didn't realize was that this silence, this vast, echoing emptiness, wasn't hurting me the way they thought it would. If anything, it was clarifying. Every evening I came home from work, kicked off my heels by the door, and slipped into something soft and loose. I'd light a candle, brew tea, open my laptop and check the latest updates from my lawyer. I was neck deep in the legal mess left behind, untangling the web of lies they'd spun with my name on credit applications, my signature forged on loan agreements, my financial reputation used and discarded like an old receipt. It was exhausting. But it was mine. My fight. My choice. Then one afternoon, as I was clearing out my spam folder, half focused, half bored, I saw it. Subject: "For what it's worth from Marcy, my cousin, the quiet one, the one who always kept her eyes low during family dinners, who never raised her voice, never rocked the boat." I clicked before I could overthink it. "Lorraine, I don't expect a reply, but I want you to know, you did the right thing. I've watched this family chew you up for years. They never saw you as a person, just a provider. Watching you finally stand up wasn't just brave. It gave me permission to rethink my silence too. Whatever they say about you now, I know the truth." I read it once, then again, then a third time, and I broke. Not out of rage, not from pain, but from the relief of being seen, of someone finally naming the thing I'd carried for so long. I cried like I hadn't in years. Not the hot, panicked sobbing of someone in crisis. It was quieter than that, like a letting go, like exhaling after holding your breath too long. A few days later, I got a letter from the bank. My name had been officially removed from the fraudulent loan my father opened. Another letter arrived the next morning. An internal investigation had been launched into Darlene's, my sister's, accounts. Suspicious transfers. Duplicate beneficiaries. My mother's name appeared in the case file notes. Willful omission, they called it. She knew. Of course she knew. And still, not a word, not a call, not even an attempt to justify it. I thought that would be the most painful part. The betrayal, the exposure, the way the truth unraveled in front of strangers in suits with clipboards. But no, the hardest part was their complete lack of remorse. They didn't deny it. They just dismissed me. Like I was the one who'd done something unforgivable. One night I found myself sitting cross-legged on the floor of my apartment, a half-empty glass of wine beside me, sorting through old photo albums I'd brought with me but never opened. Snapshots of what used to be, birthdays, Christmas mornings. My niece in a pumpkin costume, her gummy grin making me laugh despite myself. I didn't throw them out. I wasn't angry like that anymore, but I didn't need them close either, so I slid them gently into a box, taped it shut, and placed it in the back of my closet. I wasn't erasing the past. I just wasn't going to carry it with me anymore. That Sunday, I woke early. The kind of early where the sky is still gray, and the world hasn't decided what kind of day it's going to be yet. I brewed coffee, pulled a blanket around my shoulders, and stepped out onto my small porch. The breeze was cool. The trees swayed lazily. A few birds chirped like they didn't have a care in the world. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of anyone else's expectations. No demands, no guilt, no tightrope to walk, just me. I took a deep breath, let it fill my lungs, and whispered into the quiet, "You can't miss what was never real." Behind me from the kitchen, my phone buzzed. A single new voicemail, from Pamela. I didn't rush to play it, let it wait. For once, I wasn't the one chasing closure. 3 months later, I was somewhere new. Not just geographically, though technically I'd crossed state lines, but emotionally, mentally, entirely. Eugene, Oregon wasn't all that different from Boise on paper. Similar weather, similar landscape. The same kind of trees, the same overcast skies that hinted at rain without ever quite delivering. But the air felt different here. Not just cleaner, but quieter. Like it had decided not to carry other people's expectations anymore. The street I lived on was unremarkable in the best way. Rows of small houses, neighbors who waved but didn't pry, and trees lining the sidewalks that had just begun to shed their golden leaves. I watched them fall from my second-story apartment window most mornings, slow and steady, like the world itself was learning how to let go, and maybe in some way it was. I worked out of a small co-working space just 2 blocks away. Nothing fancy. White walls, too many plants, and a playlist that alternated between lo-fi beats and soft acoustic covers of songs no one wanted to admit they still liked. There was a coffee shop across the street, and within 2 weeks, the baristas already knew my name and my order. Oat milk latte, no syrup. Life had become simple in a way I never thought was allowed. My mornings were no longer filled with passive-aggressive text messages or frantic phone calls. No last-minute errands for someone else's mess. No drama dressed up as obligation. Instead, I woke up to sunlight crawling through my curtains. I stretched. I breathed. I made breakfast slowly. I worked without dread. I ended my days without needing to brace for an emotional ambush. But not every day was light. Some mornings still came with a strange, hollow ache. Not panic. Those days were over. And not fear, exactly. It was softer than that, like a healed wound remembering the shape of the knife. That morning, the air was cold enough to make me reach for a sweatshirt. I poured a second cup of coffee, then stood still for a moment. The world was quiet. But inside, something stirred. And that's when I remembered it. The voicemail. The one I never played. I hadn't deleted it. I hadn't forgotten it, not really. I just postponed it. Buried it in a drawer with old receipts and half-used notebooks. But now, for some reason, I needed to hear it. Not for closure, just to stop wondering. I sat on the edge of the bed, the ceramic mug warming my fingers, and unlocked my phone. There it was, buried under newer messages from utilities and newsletters I never read. I pressed play. Pamela's voice came through, quiet, hesitant, like she didn't trust herself to say what she needed to. "Lorraine, I didn't know it would go this far. We never meant to hurt you, we always assumed you'd be there. You always were." A pause. Not long. Just enough space for me to realize she wasn't calling to apologize. "Your sister's not doing well. This has all been hard. Can't we just stop this?" There it was. Not remorse. Not even recognition. Just a gentle nudge back toward silence. Toward pretending. I didn't hesitate. I hit delete. The sound it made, a single clean click, was more satisfying than I expected. Like shutting a door. Like locking it. Like finally choosing not to let someone back in. Later that week, a plain white envelope showed up in my mailbox. No return address. The handwriting on the front was tidy, careful, not familiar. Inside, a check for $1,200 and a small folded note. "I know we've never spoken much, but I saw what happened. You stood up when the rest of us shut up. Years ago, you paid for things my brother should have handled. I never said thank you, so here's a piece of it. Late. You were brave. Kelly, Darlene's ex-husband's sister." I held the check between my fingers, stunned. Not by the money, though it was generous, but by the word, brave. No one in my family had ever used that word about me, I was always responsible, reliable, selfish when I stopped being those things. But brave? That felt like the truth finally finding its voice. I didn't deposit the check right away. I left it on the windowsill above my kitchen sink, where the sun could fade the ink a little more each day. It wasn't about the money. It was about the fact that someone had seen the price I'd paid and acknowledged it. That night, I sat at my desk with a blank sheet of paper. Not typing, not texting, just a pen and the page. I didn't address it to anyone. Not my mother. Not Pamela. Not even Kelly. I wrote it for myself. You don't owe silence to anyone who harms you, not even if they share your last name. Not even if they once tucked you in at night. You have every right to leave. You are not a villain for protecting your peace. I folded the letter neatly and placed it in the drawer of my nightstand. Not as a keepsake, as a reminder. Later, I stepped out onto my small balcony with a mug of tea. The sky was turning that deep lavender shade right before it gives in to night, the kind of dusk that makes everything feel possible. I stood there, wrapped in a sweater, the steam rising in lazy spirals from my cup. No noise, no tension, no need to explain myself, just stillness. I sipped slowly, letting the warmth settle into my chest. No regrets, no revenge, just release. And then, as the rooftops blurred into silhouette and the last light sank below the trees, I whispered something I hadn't dared to say out loud. Not until now. I didn't lose a family. I lost a cage. And as I watched the breeze move through the trees like a quiet tide, I let the final thread of guilt unravel and disappear into the wind. Some people think family means forever. I used to believe that too, but here's what I've learned. Being related doesn't give someone the right to harm you. Love without respect is just control wrapped in guilt, and silence, no matter how noble it feels at first, only teaches others how far they can push you. I didn't walk away because I stopped loving them. I walked away because I started loving myself more. To anyone watching who's ever felt like a doormat for family, or been told to just let it go, you're not wrong for drawing a line. Boundaries are not betrayal, they're survival. And if this story hit something in you, maybe a memory, maybe a wound, I want you to know this. You are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to choose yourself. Even if it means walking alone for a while, it's better than walking wounded forever. Now, let me ask you something real. Have you ever had to choose peace over family? Do you believe loyalty has limits? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. And if this story touched you even just a little, hit that 1 in the comments so I know you felt it too. And hey, if you want more stories like this, more moments that make you think, feel, and maybe even heal a little, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. Hi, my name's Raylene. I'm a welder, been one most of my life. And last Thanksgiving, my own mother asked me not to come, said it would make things easier for everyone. Turns out, everyone didn't include me. What hurt more wasn't the disinvitation. It was realizing I'd been quietly erased long before that dinner. My sister called herself an only child, while I was still paying her law school tuition. They sat around a table I helped keep standing, and acted like I never existed. How do you stay silent when your silence is the only thing they've ever thanked you for? And what happens when you stop paying? To be forgotten? The call came in right after lunch. I had just finished rinsing my thermos at the back sink of the shop when my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen all week. Mom. We don't talk much on the phone anymore. Texts mostly. Hope you're well. Call when you can. Craig's coming by this weekend. Basic things. Things that don't require follow-ups. But she called. That was different. I stepped outside, past the steel bins and the scrap pile, and pressed the phone to my ear. Her voice was soft, measured like she had practiced it in her head. Raylene, honey, about Thanksgiving, she started. We've been thinking it might be easier if you didn't come this year. You know, just to keep things comfortable for everyone. That was it. No explanation, no ask, no pause to wait for what I thought. Just that. I didn't say anything. I let her finish whatever justification she had rehearsed. But it didn't matter. I wasn't invited. It wasn't like I'd been planning a grand entrance or anything. I wasn't bringing anyone. I wasn't even planning to stay long. Just the usual: drop off the turkey, eat the side dishes no one else wanted to claim, smile through the awkward conversations, and leave before the wine started making people too honest. But still, I had ordered the smoked bird from the same place I had every year since Dad passed. I'd paid in advance. I'd even picked out a cinnamon glaze to try this time, thinking it might actually make a difference this year. "Comfortable," I whispered after the call ended. "Comfortable for who?" I walked back into the shop and nodded to Mike, one of my guys, who didn't ask why I looked like I'd swallowed a brick. I didn't want to cry in front of him, or anyone, really. So I put my helmet on. The Ray sticker on the side was peeling from years of heat and time. Dad had given me that name when I was 15, and welding my first toolbox frame. He was the one who told me I had hands smarter than most heads. He was also the last person in the family who ever introduced me proudly. I powered up the torch. The hiss of gas and flash of blue light grounded me. Sparks flew, metal bent. Everything made sense again, until the job was done and I was left with silence. After my shift, I took the long way home. The road curved through the edge of town, past the feed store and the billboard advertising Jolene's firm in training as future legal leaders. Her photo was there, arms crossed, confident, clean, everything in place. I pulled into my driveway just as dusk was settling. The streetlights hadn't come on yet, but I didn't bother turning on my porch light. Inside, the house was quiet. My boots landed next to the bench by the door. I walked straight to the fridge and opened it, staring at the shelves like something might rearrange itself into comfort. There it was, the brine starter kit. Fresh rosemary, orange peel, peppercorn. A tradition, I guess. One I held onto for longer than I should have. I pulled it out and stood over the sink for a moment. The air smelled sharp from the citrus. Clean. Hopeful. I held the bag a second longer, then dropped it straight into the trash. I didn't cry. I thought maybe I would, but it didn't come. Instead, I checked the family group chat. My name hadn't been mentioned once that day. Not even a "Ray, you okay?" or "Where you at?" Nothing. Photos of table arrangements, linen napkins folded like little birds. Jolene's boyfriend Craig was tagged in a post showing off the wine he brought. That man has never said a word to me, never shook my hand. Not once. The caption under the photo said, "So lucky to have such a perfect, polished evening planned with people who matter most." People who matter most. It wasn't just a missed call anymore. It was a message. I thought about texting Mom back. Just a single line. "Thank you for the clarity." But I didn't. I didn't go to the garage either. Not yet. I sat at the kitchen table, lights off, shadows long and quiet around me. Through the garage door's small window, I could see the blue glow of my torch setup. I had a job lined up tomorrow, a gate repair for a family that probably didn't know the first thing about a welding torch, but still paid on time and said thank you. I sat there for a while, hands folded, breathing slow. Then I whispered it to the dark. So this is who I am to them. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch, fully clothed, eyes open in the dark. The hum from the fridge was louder than usual, and every time the heat kicked on, it startled me. At some point, I moved to the kitchen, poured black coffee into a chipped mug, and sat back at the table where everything had started to shift. By sunrise, I still hadn't turned on the lights. It wasn't until mid-morning that I finally got up and grabbed my phone. I had 3 missed texts, one from Vera, my cousin on Mom's side. We weren't close, not in a weekly chat way, but she always remembered my birthday and had a habit of noticing what others tried to ignore. Her message was short. "You might want to see this." Attached was a video clip, shaky camera work, background chatter, a living room decorated in gold accents. And there was Jolene, standing next to Craig, holding a wine glass like she belonged in a Pottery Barn catalog. The lighting wasn't flattering, but the sound was clear. Someone off-screen asked, "So you have any siblings?" Jolene laughed. "Technically, yeah, but I'm pretty much an only child." She didn't stutter, didn't blink, just said it like she was stating her Starbucks order. I didn't throw my phone, I didn't scream, I didn't even hit replay. I just stood there, still holding the mug, now cold in my hand, and looked out the window. That line, it wasn't the first betrayal, but it was the most honest, because it proved something I'd been trying not to believe for years. It wasn't just that they forgot me, it's that they meant to. Later that afternoon, I stopped at the gas station on my way to the hardware supply store. I had to pick up a new grinder wheel and a box of gloves. I wasn't planning to go inside, but I needed caffeine. The coffee machine was busted, so I grabbed a bottled one from the fridge near the register. That's when I saw the newspaper. It was sitting right there by the cash wrap, folded open to the community section. The headline read, "Celebrating Local Success. The Madison Family Hosts Thanksgiving in Tulsa." There was a full-color photo. Jolene in the center, Craig standing just behind her, with his hand resting on her shoulder. Mom and Dad on either side of them, dressed like they were auditioning for a catalog spread. Their house looked cleaner than I remembered it. It was the house I was still helping pay for. My name wasn't in the article, not in the caption, not even as a passing mention. I stared at it for a few seconds longer than I should have. The cashier asked if I needed anything else, and I shook my head. My voice wouldn't have worked even if I'd tried. Back at the shop, I kept to myself. Mike could tell I wasn't in the mood, and to his credit, he didn't push. We had a couple minor repairs that day, hinges on a metal gate, a custom trailer hitch, nothing that required too much brain power. I took the bathroom break mid-afternoon. That's when I remembered it. The conversation from months ago. One of the rare times Jolene and I were alone, just the two of us. I had said, "You can joke all you want, call me Metal Mouth, or Scrap Queen to your friends. I don't care, just don't ever say you're an only child. That's the one thing I ask." She'd nodded. Not a word of argument. No roll of her eyes. Just nodded and moved on. And now, here we were. I rinsed the grease off my fingers, stared at my reflection in the mirror. I looked tired, but not broken. Worn, but not soft. That night, I went through my phone and turned off the tuition payment reminders. All of them. The email notices from Jolene's school. The calendar pop-ups. I deleted the recurring grocery order I used to send to Mom's place every year. A gesture, I thought, that meant something. I opened my laptop and started printing. Not to start a fight, not to prove a point, just to document the things I knew they'd pretend didn't happen. Tuition receipts, wire transfers, screenshots of texts and requests, the mortgage assistance documents I signed when they needed help just for a little while. It took an hour. I put everything in a manila folder and labeled it with a Sharpie, in case they forget. Then I opened the family group chat. I scrolled past Jolene's long message about healing through holidays, about gratitude and forgiveness, and, what matters most, is love. She had attached a photo of the dinner setup. Napkin rings, candles, fancy cutlery. Under it, she wrote, "No matter what's happened, we're still family. Let's focus on what unites us." No mention of me. Not once. I didn't respond. I didn't leave a snarky comment. I simply clicked Leave Group. No alert. No fanfare. No one reached out. Not one. The envelope sat on the kitchen table for half an hour before I touched it again. Thick paper, the kind lawyers and banks use. I ran my finger over the words I'd written, for future reference. Not a threat, not a warning, just a reminder for myself, what I had done, what they had asked for, what I had given. I slid it into the fireproof box under the counter and clicked the latch shut. Then I rinsed out my mug, tied my hair back, and headed to the shop. It was the day before Thanksgiving, and the streets were already busier than usual. Trucks making deliveries, people crowding gas stations with coolers and bags of ice. It had rained early in the morning, so the pavement still shimmered in patches where the sun hadn't dried it yet. Inside the shop, Mike and I were finishing up the last 2 jobs before we closed for the long weekend. He worked quietly. I appreciated that. Every now and then, he'd glance at me, like he wanted to ask if I was okay. But he didn't. That kind of silence is its own kind of loyalty. Just before lunch, my phone buzzed. It was an email from Jolene. Subject line, tuition reminder. Message, hey, just making sure you've got the next school payment scheduled. It's due by decount, too. Thanks. No greeting, no context, no question about my day, my work, my life. Just, thanks. I scrolled through old emails, 3 years worth. They were all the same, short, directive, unsigned like I was a bank, not a sister. Never once a thank you that wasn't tied to a due date. I closed the inbox and slid my phone face down on the counter. Later that day, back at home, I pulled out the folder with the mortgage statements. The ones from the house. The one they'd be gathering in tomorrow without me. That house was in Jolene's name. That part was true. We'd done it that way because she had better credit, better standing when Dad got sick. But the payments? The upkeep? The property taxes that had almost gotten them evicted 2 years ago? That was all me. I looked at a framed photo by the front door. One from a 4th of July, long ago. Everyone was there. I was there. We looked like a family. Now, the only time my name came up was when a bill was due. I placed the mortgage papers next to the tuition records. And then I remembered something else. After locking up for the night, I stopped by the grocery store for a last-minute supply pickup. In the frozen foods aisle, I spotted my father. Not in person, not literally, but his voice. He was on the phone, walking down another aisle, talking louder than he realized. I moved closer, not meaning to eavesdrop, but unable to stop myself. I just think we need to be careful, he said. Raylene's always been, well, sensitive. It's not like she doesn't help, but let's be honest. She's not exactly part of Craig's world. A pause. I mean, come on. She's a welder. She wouldn't understand. That line, those 5 words, settled in me like iron dropped in water. She wouldn't understand. As if my work made me incapable of grasping anything that wasn't covered in soot or wrapped in steel. As if the cost of being useful was being invisible. I drove home in silence, parked in the back, and didn't bother turning on the porch light again. It didn't feel like mine anyway. Inside, I changed into my old workshop hoodie and pulled out my laptop. I backed up everything, bank records, invoices, loan cosign papers, onto a USB drive. I labeled folders by year. I added date stamps to every screenshot, 17 tuition payments, 48 months of mortgage coverage, several direct deposits to my parents' account labeled for groceries and for taxes. All of it organized, time-stamped, irrefutable. I didn't do it because I was planning to use it. I did it because I finally understood I had to stop pretending it didn't matter. Some families say thank you, some just expect it again. When I finished, I pulled out a clean envelope, placed the USB inside, and sealed it. In permanent marker, I wrote, for future reference, Ignace. Then, I put it next to the plaque I got when I finished my apprenticeship, before Jolene even started college. The irony didn't feel poetic, it just felt true. I didn't sleep in that morning, not because I had anything pressing to do, but because my body no longer knew what rest was supposed to feel like. The air inside the house was cold and still. I kept the curtains drawn, not to hide, but to keep the world at arm's length for a little while longer. Thanksgiving had always felt more like an obligation than a celebration, but this year, it felt like a statement, a confirmation. The dinner table was set across town in the same house I'd helped save more than once, and my name wouldn't be spoken over mashed potatoes or beneath fake laughter. I heated up leftover chili and sat on the couch with a blanket over my knees. I didn't bother with music or TV. The silence suited me better. At 10:42 a.m., my phone buzzed. The text came from Mom. But the message, it wasn't meant for me. Let's keep it polished tonight. Don't worry about Raylene showing up. I told her it's for the best. There was no accidental about it. Not really. She might have hit the wrong contact, but the contents were perfectly deliberate. No apology, no softness. Just a reassurance that I'd been erased properly. I stared at the screen long enough for the light to fade back to black. Not one part of me felt surprised. Not anymore. I set the phone on the table, face up. No need to hide from it now. By noon, the sounds outside began to shift. Car doors opening, laughter carrying over fences. Somewhere, a football game played on someone else's TV. I didn't mind being still. I didn't miss the noise. At 1:08 p.m., I got a message from Vera. She didn't say hello, didn't dance around it, just sent a video clip with no caption. She knew better than to sugarcoat. In the clip, Jolene stood in someone's living room, glass in hand, perfectly lit by fairy lights strung around the ceiling. Craig was next to her, nodding like he'd heard the story before. A woman's voice, off-screen, asked the question. "So, do you have any siblings?" Jolene smiled. "Well, I guess I'm technically not an only child, but in the ways that matter, yeah." It was said with the same tone you'd use to talk about bad weather. Mildly inconvenient. Out of your control. I watched it once. Then again. I didn't forward it. Didn't screen record. I just saved it and placed the phone screen down again. She said it like I'd never existed. And maybe, in her mind, I hadn't. Not in any version that fit the story she liked to tell. At 2:30, I joined a scheduled Zoom call with the Oklahoma Welding Women's Guild. I'd nearly forgotten I'd accepted the invite last month. They were honoring me with an award. Something small but kind. Blue Collar Excellence, Trailblazer Award. Someone introduced me by saying, "We need more women like Raylene, showing young girls that this kind of work is something to be proud of." I smiled. I thanked them. I meant every word. I didn't cry on camera, even when they asked if I wanted to say anything to other young women starting out. I said, "You don't have to dress it up. You don't have to apologize for getting your hands dirty. If it pays the bills and builds something real, it's worth more than a polished title that does nothing but decorate a resume." They clapped. A few typed messages into the chat box. I clicked "Leave meeting" without waiting for it to end. I placed the award beside the envelope from earlier. 2 truths, one forged with effort, one sealed in silence. Later that evening, I returned to the table. This time, I opened my laptop, not to search, not to escape, but to create something I hadn't made before. A letter. Not addressed, not dated, just titled, "If Questioned." I didn't start with anger. I started with timelines. Tuition breakdowns, semester by semester. Mortgage dates, grocery payments during flu season. Texts asking me to spot them again because Dad's check hadn't cleared. I included the first time I wasn't invited to dinner. The first time Jolene said, "Just keep it quiet about the house." The first time I was cropped out of a photo before it hit social media. It was just facts, no adjectives, no commentary. I wasn't writing to beg, I wasn't writing to shame. I was writing because truth had been drowned in enough half glasses of Chardonnay at that dining room table, and I didn't plan on letting that story be the only one anyone remembered. When I finished, I printed the letter and slipped it into the file folder alongside everything else. The folder was thick now, heavy in a way I could feel in my hands. I took it to the small safe I kept under the garage workbench, dialed the code, placed the folder gently inside. As I closed the door, I paused. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt prepared. I looked at the locked safe and whispered, "I hope you never make me use it." The garage was still warm from earlier. I leaned against the workbench, arms crossed, staring at the safe. The door was locked. The folder was inside. That should have been the end of it. But I knew it wasn't. I walked back into the house, boot heels tapping against the concrete. The evening had settled in, heavy and quiet, the kind that makes everything sound louder than it is. I turned off the kitchen light, letting the soft orange hue from the porch seep in. Then I opened my laptop. It took a few seconds for the school's portal to load. I'd logged in so many times over the years. The browser autofilled the credentials. I navigated straight to the payment section. The pending charge sat at the top. Spring tuition, $19,000 and change. I didn't hesitate. One click, cancel, confirm. A small notification popped up. Authorization removed. Payment not scheduled. That was it. I sat there for a moment longer, then closed the lid, walked outside, and turned off the porch light. For the first time in years, I wasn't on call, not for them, not for her. Around 8:30 that night, the first text came in. "Hey, did you forget the payment?" I didn't respond. 15 minutes later, "School's saying nothing's processed. Is there an issue?" Still nothing. Then, "Raylene?" I opened the drawer next to the couch and dropped the phone in, screen down. If there was an emergency, it wasn't mine to handle anymore. I poured myself a glass of water. The house was quiet again, no buzzing, no reminders. At 9:52, the phone rang. Landline. Hardly anyone used it anymore, which meant one thing: Mom. I let it go to voicemail. Then she called again. I picked up on the third ring. "I don't know what you're doing," she started, voice already raised. "But this is going to destroy your sister's future." I didn't say a word. "She's counting on that degree. She has deadlines, Raylene, responsibilities. She's already told people she's covered for this semester." Still, I waited. Then came the line that did it. "You're going to make the whole family look bad." There it was. Not concern for Jolene. Not a trace of accountability, just fear of exposure. I inhaled, slow and controlled. My voice didn't shake when I asked, would Craig's family disinvite their own daughter from dinner for having a job? She didn't answer. I waited, but there was nothing. Just that kind of silence you get when someone knows they can't lie their way out, so they say nothing at all. I heard the shift. Her breathing changed. The guilt was there, barely masked by her tone when she tried again. "I'm just saying, you could have at least told her first." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. She never told me when she erased me. I hung up. Minutes later, my father's name flashed on the screen. I answered. "Ray, I know you're upset, but this isn't how families handle things." "No," I said. "Families don't send people away from dinner tables either." He sighed hard, like he was the one exhausted by me. "We all have to make sacrifices sometimes." "I already did," I said, "and none of you noticed." He tried to talk over me, but I didn't let him. "You want me to keep paying? Fine. Tell me who's willing to match me, dollar for dollar. Who's putting their name on the check this time?" He didn't respond. I waited 5 seconds, then hung up. It wasn't anger that carried me, it was peace. The kind that comes when you stop letting other people rent space in your head for free. I reopened the laptop. I didn't go back to the payment screen. Instead, I opened the family group chat. The one I had muted long ago. The messages had stacked up. Jolene's texts now read like panic. "If I don't pay by Monday, I get dropped from the semester. This could ruin everything. You're not seriously going to leave me hanging like this." I stared at the screen, then typed slowly. "No one said thank you for what I gave, so don't expect me to apologize for what I'm taking back." Then I closed the thread. No more debates, no more explanations. The thread went quiet. I leaned back in my chair, exhaled, and closed my eyes. The sound of the shop next door locking up for the night drifted through the window. A cold front had rolled in. I got up, threw on a hoodie, and opened the back door. The sky above was still. No wind. Just stars and silence. For once, I wasn't bracing for the next message. I wasn't waiting to be needed. The morning after the cold front rolled in, the air outside had a bite to it. I could feel it coming through the garage walls while I sanded down a set of hinges for a custom gate order. My fingers were stiff, but my thoughts were clear, sharper than they'd been in days. Maybe silence really was a kind of healing. That clarity didn't last long. Around mid-morning, my phone vibrated on the corner of the workbench. I glanced over, expecting another delivery confirmation, or maybe something from Vera. But it was a voicemail from Mom. I let it sit for a while before I finally hit play, wiping my hands on a towel as her voice filled the room. "Hi, sweetheart. Look, maybe we were wrong not to include you last week. It was never personal. It was just... With Craig's family, we wanted everything to feel smooth. If you want, I can mention you next time we see him. I'm sure he wouldn't mind. There it was. The olive branch made of plastic. If you want. Like acknowledgement was optional. I hit replay, not because I didn't hear it the first time, but because I needed to make sure she actually said it that way. She did. She'd offered to mention me, not apologize, not ask for a conversation, just name drop me if I felt like I'd earned it. I walked into the kitchen and sat down at the table where the envelope had once been. The safe was locked now, but my patience wasn't. I pulled my phone out again and opened a new message. I typed it out slowly, then read it aloud once. I was never asking to be introduced. I just asked not to be hidden. You couldn't give me that. Then I hit send. I didn't wait for a reply. I knew it wouldn't come. Instead, I opened my accounting sheet on the laptop and moved Jolene's tuition line item from active to closed. I added a note in the comments. Final installment canceled. It felt good, not satisfying. Just finished. That night, I was halfway through reheating some leftover chicken when the phone rang again. This time, it was Jolene. I hesitated before answering. The last time we spoke, she was still pretending this wasn't happening. "Ray," she said, breathless like she'd run somewhere. "I don't know what you're doing, but I've already applied for 3 externships. They're assuming I'm finishing this semester. If I get dropped, I lose all of it." Her voice wasn't angry. It cracked around the edges. "I'm not trying to fight," she added quickly. I need this. You know how much I've put into it." I sat there, holding the phone to my ear, letting the silence stretch out. Then I spoke. "If I wasn't good enough to sit at the table with them, my money shouldn't be either." She didn't respond. "It's not revenge," I said quietly. "It's a refund." I hung up. No yelling, no drama. Just a final line. I stood at the counter, watching the microwave tick down the last 30 seconds on my dinner. The plastic cover spun slowly. I didn't even care if the food was warm. I ate quickly, alone. Then, I put my plate in the sink and walked to the garage. The air smelled like cold metal and scorched wood. I took a deep breath, tied on my apron, and pulled on my gloves. I needed to make something, not to prove a point, just to let my hands do the talking. I grabbed some scrap tubing and a small square of steel. I welded together a table frame, uneven on purpose. 1 chair, just one. Then I painted the chair gold. Not a flashy, clean gold. A muted, almost tarnished finish that looked better in low light. And once it dried, I burned it, just enough to crack the surface. I didn't smooth it out. I didn't fix the balance. On the base, I welded 3 words. No seat saved. It wasn't art for them. It was truth for me. I took a photo of the sculpture the next morning, just as the sun started to break through the frost on the windows. I posted it on my account. No caption, no hashtags, no location. By noon, it had been shared nearly 200 times. People were tagging friends, sharing their own stories in the comments. She built the table. They didn't even give her a chair. This hit me harder than I expected. Some families don't need to be fixed. They need to be left behind. I didn't respond to any of them. But I saw that Jolene had liked the post. That was all the confirmation I needed. She'd seen it. She knew. By Sunday afternoon, the wind had picked up across Tulsa. The sky was a flat gray, the kind that sits on your shoulders like a warning. I just finished cleaning the welding tips and sweeping the garage when Vera called. She never calls. Ever. All she said was, "Check your email." I dried my hands, opened my inbox, and found a subject line waiting for me. Forwarded message. Madison Family Dinner. Attached was a screenshot of an invitation, photos of the floral arrangements, and a long email thread. My sister's careful planning, her tone saccharine, all punctuated with phrases like, "Let's make this flawless," and "Craig's parents are very detail-oriented." Below, it was Vera's message. "They should see the whole picture, don't you think?" There wasn't a question in her voice when we spoke next. It was already decided. By 5 o'clock, an email titled Family Integrity Full Picture had hit half a dozen inboxes with a timed send feature. I didn't ask how she got their addresses. I didn't need to know. Inside that email were PDFs of every tuition payment I'd ever made on Jolene's behalf, mortgage documentation tied to the house where the dinner was being hosted, screenshots of texts, the video of Jolene saying she was, functionally, an only child, a link to the welding union's award announcement. No subjectivity, no rant, just truth. The party started just after 6. I didn't go. I wasn't invited. But I could picture the whole scene in my mind. Their dining room always felt like a stage. White plates, silver trim, crystal glasses that no one could pronounce correctly. Candles flickering just right. Mom fluttering between rooms like a hostess trying too hard. Jolene, smiling at the head of the table, Craig at her side. At 6:42 p.m., the first buzz hit. A phone screen lit up. Then another. A low hum of confusion. Forks paused midair. Someone cleared their throat and asked, "What's this?" Craig scrolled through the documents in silence. His father frowned, glanced at Jolene, then back to the screen. Craig's mother raised an eyebrow the way women do when they've spent decades in rooms filled with lies. The same eyebrow Mom pretended not to notice. Jolene went pale. I wasn't there, but I'd bet my boots she tried to speak. She always did when the silence wasn't hers to control, but Craig beat her to it. "This whole evening," he said, folding his napkin slowly, "is beautiful, but apparently it's not the only thing built on borrowed credit." He stood, thanked everyone for the meal, and left. Just like that. No shouting, no dramatic exits. That was the part Jolene never understood. Not all storms make noise. Hours later, while I was fixing a loose hinge on the back gate under the yellow shop light, Vera texted me again. "Local bloggers picked it up, it's spreading." I didn't ask which blogger. I just wiped the sweat from my brow and kept working. The post came out around midnight. The welder behind the law degree, a Thanksgiving story. It was well written, fair, not clickbait. It talked about sacrifice, the invisible backbone of family success, and how some people build legacy in silence, while others build status on top of it. I didn't comment, didn't share, but I did post one more photo. It was the sculpture again, no seat saved, now displayed in the corner of my shop, next to the union plaque and a box of spare bolts. This time, I added a caption. "If you don't invite the builder, don't sit at their table." The post went viral within hours. It didn't matter anymore. The damage, if you want to call it that, had been done. Jolene's externship coordinator emailed a polite request for clarification about her academic funding. The firm where she hoped to intern had paused all communication, citing character alignment reviews. Our parents, to their credit, stopped trying to spin it. Maybe even they couldn't talk their way around hard numbers and undeniable timestamps. By sunrise, I had a few hundred new followers. Women from every state, mostly welders, pipe fitters, mechanics, and mothers who wrote things like, "My sister took the credit. I took the night shifts." I cried reading this. Thank you. Your story is mine, just with different names. I read them all, every single one. And when the bell above the shop door rang at 9:03 a.m., I didn't have to look up to know who it was. She didn't knock, didn't call ahead. Jolene stood there in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, no makeup, hair pulled into a messy bun that didn't look intentional. She didn't speak right away, but her eyes, those wide, exhausted eyes, were screaming. She didn't say anything at first, just stood in the doorway like a stranger who'd taken a wrong turn. Her face was bare, and for once, it wasn't because she was trying to look effortless. Jolene looked worn down, but it wasn't the kind of tired that comes from work. It was the exhaustion that creeps in when a lie runs out of road. I didn't offer her a seat. I didn't reach for a second mug. She stepped inside anyway, walking toward the bench where I kept scrap metal stacked in neat rows. Then, in one clumsy motion, she dropped a stack of papers onto my work table. They fanned out across the surface. Printouts of blog headlines, screenshots, tuition receipts. The last one sat front and center. Oklahoma's quiet backbone. The sister who paid in silence. I didn't need to read them. I'd lived every line. "You destroyed my life," she snapped, voice cracking mid-sentence. "For attention. You always needed to be the one people felt sorry for." I wiped the dust from my hands and set my welding mask down slowly, never breaking eye contact. "You want to talk about attention?" I asked. "You erased me from pictures, holidays, even your stories. Then got surprised when people filled in the blanks themselves." "You think this is fair?" she fired back. "You could have just said something. You didn't have to humiliate me." I took a step forward, not to threaten, but to make sure she saw that I wasn't shrinking anymore. "Fair?" I said. "I begged you not to pretend I didn't exist. You did it anyway, and I kept quiet because I thought if I kept giving, eventually, you'd remember I mattered." She looked like she wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come, so I kept going. "You're not mad because I lied. You're mad because I stopped helping you hide yours." Jolene's hands trembled slightly as she reached down, gathered the papers, and tried to stack them again like she could make them neat enough to erase what they said. "I lost Craig," she whispered. "You turned him against me." I almost laughed, but I didn't. Instead, I walked to the corner of the shop and opened the safe. The folder was still there, untouched. I carried it back to the table and dropped it in front of her. "I didn't turn him against you," I said. "He just saw what I've seen for years." She stared at the folder, but didn't open it. "That's everything," I added. "Every dime, every bill, every silence you mistook for consent." Jolene looked up then, eyes red, but not from tears, more like someone who'd run out of energy to pretend. "This isn't revenge," I told her. "It's what happens when you treat someone like a utility instead of a sister." She didn't say a word. I walked over to the front door and opened it, letting the cold air spill in. "You can take the folder or leave it, but this is the last time we speak." For a moment, she didn't move. Then, quietly, she picked up the folder, turned, and walked out. No slamming door. No final insult. Just the creak of hinges and the soft click as the door closed behind her. I stood there for a while, listening to the emptiness she left behind. Then I turned off the shop light and walked back to the garage. That night, I opened my phone for the last time under my name. I deleted the family group chat permanently, not just left it. Gone. I changed my number, not out of spite, but for peace. I opened the scholarship application I'd been working on for months, the one I'd been too busy, or too scared, to finalize. This time, I filled in the last fields. Raylene Grant Welding Scholarship, in honor of the women who build silently. Under sponsoring name, I used my mother's maiden name. Because sometimes you rebuild your legacy by going around the wreckage. I submitted it before midnight. No announcements, no applause. Just quiet resolve. I went to sleep with the window cracked open, letting the cool air settle over the room. No dreams, no regrets, just space to breathe. The next morning, I walked out to the mailbox with my coffee. Tucked between ads and bills was a small white envelope with my name on it. No return address. But I didn't need one. I knew that handwriting. I stood on the porch for a moment, feeling the weight of it in my hand. Then I dropped it straight into the recycling bin. Not out of bitterness, but because some things don't need to be reopened. The envelope hit the bottom of the recycling bin with the softest sound, barely louder than the breeze slipping under the garage door. Still, it echoed through me like a gavel, final and unflinching. I stood there for a second longer, coffee cooling in my hand, then turned back toward the house. Outside, the neighborhood was stringing lights. Wreaths were going up. Inflatable snowmen were beginning to invade yards. December had officially taken over. I didn't decorate, not out of spite, just didn't feel like pretending. That afternoon, the shop was quiet. Orders had slowed for the season, and I wasn't in a rush to change that. I did a few quotes over email, polished a metal gate design, then stepped outside for some air. I leaned against the doorframe when the phone rang. It was the landline. Again. I let it ring once. Twice. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something, curiosity maybe, had me pick it up. Raylene. It was Mom. I didn't answer right away. She filled the silence. Just wanted to see how you were doing. I heard the weather's turning colder. Small talk, safe ground. I'm fine, I said. She hesitated. I could hear her swallow. Then, your sister isn't doing well. I waited. We were hoping you'd reach out, just to talk. Maybe help her through this. She's been struggling. I didn't raise my voice, didn't take the bait. I just spoke plainly. No one reached out for me when I was the one left out in the cold. Mom was quiet. I think she was holding her breath. I didn't offer more. I didn't owe more. I hope you're well, she said at last. Click. That was the last time we spoke that year. Later that week, I received an email from the local trade school. One of their instructors had seen the article. They wanted to know if I'd come speak to their senior welding students about my career, my business, and what it meant to be a woman in the trades. I said yes. I expected a small turnout, maybe a few curious eyes, a few half-hearted questions. Instead, I walked into a packed multi-purpose room. Folding chairs filled, some folks standing in the back. Students, instructors, a few parents, mostly working-class folks. You could see it in their boots, their calloused hands, the way they sat forward when I started to talk. I didn't share gossip. I didn't trash my family. I shared what I'd built. I talked about the first time I burned through a weld and kept going, about the old Ford pickup I'd helped rebuild in high school, the one I drove until it rattled itself into retirement, about choosing a path that didn't come with fanfare or holiday cards, but one that fed me, clothed me, and kept the lights on when everyone else pretended not to notice I was there. When I finished, the room stood in applause. A woman around my age approached me, eyes damp but steady. "You remind me of my daughter," she said. "She thinks she has to fit into a mold to be loved." I smiled. Then maybe the mold's the problem, not her. Afterward, I sat in my truck with the heater blowing on my boots and stared at the building. I thought about how many times I'd waited for someone to see me, really see me. Turns out all I needed was to stand still long enough for the dust to settle and realize I wasn't invisible. I was just facing the wrong direction. That night, I ate dinner alone at the table I'd built myself. Heavy cedar, solid legs, no fancy finish. Just honest wood. No centerpiece, no cloth napkins. Just a bowl of stew, a chunk of bread, and a cup of cider still warm from the stove. The chair across from me was empty, but it didn't ache. I didn't miss the noise, or the performance. I looked at that chair, and I knew. If anyone ever wanted to sit there again, they'd have to bring more than their appetite. They'd have to bring their honesty, their presence, their ability to see someone beyond what's convenient. Because I wasn't waiting anymore. I was never asking for a seat. I was building the table. "Hello, my name's Arlena. I drove 8 hours through hail and wind just to surprise my parents on their 50th anniversary. Cake in the back seat, hope in my chest. But when I walked in, they didn't even have my name on the guest list. No room key, no seat, no mention. Just silence. Like I'd never existed. What kind of family celebrates without their daughter? And what happens when that daughter finally stops waiting to be welcomed and starts asking why? The wipers scraped across the windshield like nails on glass, each swing barely clearing the heavy mix of rain and sleet coming down in sheets. I'd been driving for nearly 8 hours, through mountain fog and patches of hail that made my hands clench the steering wheel like I was bracing for impact. The silence in the car was louder than the storm itself. I didn't turn on music, didn't call anyone. My phone sat face down on the passenger seat next to a small white box tied with a red ribbon. Inside, a dozen lemon cupcakes I'd stayed up baking last night. My mother used to love lemon. I told myself this time might be different. It was their 50th wedding anniversary. A milestone. I'd booked a room at a nearby inn, bought a soft cardigan my mother once gave me, and folded it neatly in my overnight bag. Maybe, just maybe, they'd see I still tried. Maybe I'd walk in, dripping wet and unexpected, and my father would smile like he used to, motion me over with a big laugh. Maybe my mother's eyes would light up and she'd say, "You always did have the worst timing, but come here." I clung to that fantasy as I passed the "Welcome to Santa Barbara" sign just before sunset, the sky bleeding gray over the coastline. I pulled up a block away from the house, a Spanish-style villa on the bluff overlooking the Pacific. The same house I'd once called home. Cars lined the street. The glow of warm lights poured from the windows, flickering against the storm like nothing could touch them. Laughter, music. Someone clinked a glass inside. I parked behind a dark SUV and killed the engine. The rain drummed harder now. I grabbed the cupcake box in my coat, slipped the key into my purse, and stepped out. The cold was immediate and sharp. My heels clicked against the wet pavement as I crossed the street, hair sticking to my cheeks, water slipping past my collar. My fingers tightened around the box, like it was the only thing keeping me upright. The closer I got, the more I noticed the little details. Tulips in the flower beds, party lights strung over the archway, a valet checking umbrellas. I stood at the door, heart racing. I rang the bell. A young woman answered, mid-20s maybe, wearing a headset and holding a clipboard. The kind of cool efficiency that made you feel like an interruption. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm Arlena," I said, my voice tight. "I'm here for the anniversary party." She glanced at her clipboard, flipped a few pages, looked up. "Last name?" "Vexley." Her eyes flickered with something, discomfort maybe? She looked again, then back at me. "I'm sorry, I don't have you listed on the guest registry." My smile froze. "I'm their daughter." She blinked. "Oh, hang on. Let me check with someone inside." She stepped away before I could say another word. I stood there, cupcakes slowly soaking through their box, coat clinging to my spine. The air felt thinner than it had before. Through the door's narrow window, I saw Lorana, my older sister, grinning under the chandeliers. Her husband Benton poured champagne into a line of flutes. Their daughter twirled in a velvet dress like she was the guest of honor. No one looked toward the door. Minutes passed. The planner didn't return. No one did. The music swelled. I heard someone tap a fork against glass, a toast rising up over the crowd. I shifted my weight, the water seeping down into my boots. My name wasn't missed. My presence wasn't expected. It had been removed. The last time something like this happened, years ago at my niece's recital, I told myself it was a mistake, a miscommunication. But this? This was deliberate. I backed off the porch. The cupcakes were ruined. My hair was ruined. But that wasn't what stung. It was the look in that woman's eyes when she didn't recognize me. It was the way the house where I learned to walk, where I nursed my first heartbreak, where I once sang Happy Anniversary with frosting on my chin, stood so tall, so warm, and yet made no space for me. I didn't walk back to the car. Not yet. Instead, I stepped to the side, out of sight, but still in the rain, and looked back at the house. I needed to see who else walked in. Who else had a seat at the table I helped set, year after year. I needed to know how far this went. So I stopped waiting to be seen, and started watching what they didn't want me to know. From the edge of the driveway, I lingered long enough to spot the people arriving. Names I recognized from my childhood, neighbors from years ago, distant relatives I hadn't seen since I still wore braces. I watched them walk past the entry with hugs and warm welcomes. Champagne flutes passed to them like admission tickets. But no one came out for me. I wasn't even a forgotten coat left behind in the rain. I was a decision. Eventually, I turned and walked back to my car. My coat had soaked through completely. The cupcake box had collapsed inward, lemon frosting smeared along the lid. I set it gently on the passenger seat, like it still meant something. By the time I reached the inn I had reserved for the weekend, this lovely Art Deco-style place with striped awnings and potted palms, I was already rehearsing how I'd phrase my check-in, pretending I wasn't dripping or emotionally unraveling. "Reservation for Arlena Vexley," I said, voice steadier than expected. The woman behind the counter typed something in. Then she paused, blinked, and looked at me with that same slight stiffness I'd come to recognize. Polite confusion. "I'm sorry," she said. "Your booking was canceled 3 days ago." I frowned. "That can't be right. I booked it 2 months ago through the app." She turned her screen slightly toward me. "It was canceled under your father's account. There's a note here about reallocation for family coordination." My jaw locked. I hadn't used his account in years. The only reason he would have still had access to my itinerary is if someone gave it to him. Someone like Lorana. "Do you have any other rooms?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "There's a medical tech conference in town," she said gently. "I'm afraid we're fully booked." I stepped outside again. It had stopped raining, but my body couldn't tell the difference. I sat behind the wheel for what felt like an hour, trying to will away the sting behind my eyes. Then I reached for my phone and called Sophie, my college roommate, the one person who never made me feel like a burden. "Girl, are you serious?" she said when I explained. "You drove all the way here and they didn't even list you? Get over here right now. I got a pull-out couch and leftover pad thai." I drove the 40 minutes in silence. Her neighborhood was nestled in the hills, the kind where everyone parked halfway on the curb and porch lights stayed on year-round. Sophie greeted me barefoot in flannel pants, gave me a hug that cracked my spine, and didn't ask a single unnecessary question. She handed me a blanket and let me sleep. The next morning, I pulled my hair into a bun, put on my best navy dress, and reapplied lipstick with the same precision as someone preparing for war. This time, I didn't ring the doorbell or wait for someone to remember me. I walked straight into the venue. The ballroom was drenched in gold. Chandelier crystals tossed reflections across the floor. A pianist played something elegant and hollow. Lorana had spared no expense. White lilies on every table, seating cards in cursive, staff in tuxedo vests. I saw faces I hadn't seen in decades, and most of them barely looked twice at me. When my parents came into view, I instinctively stood straighter. My mother's hair was pinned in soft curls. My father wore the same navy blazer I remembered from his retirement party. They were mid-conversation with Lorana, who glowed in a champagne dress. Dad saw me first. He nodded. That was all. Not a smile. Not even a raised brow of surprise. Just a nod. Like he wasn't sure where to place me in the room. Mom waved faintly, her hand rising halfway before she turned back to the waiter beside her. She complimented the hors d'oeuvres. Didn't look my way again. I found a seat at the far end of the room, near the restroom corridor. A side table marked Overflow Family. No one spoke to me, except a woman I didn't recognize, who asked if this was the line for the bar. Then came the speeches. Lorana stood first, naturally. She began with a theatrical pause and pressed her hand to her heart. "Our parents built everything we have," she said, her voice quivering just enough. "They taught us about loyalty, about commitment, about unconditional love." I almost laughed. The applause came like waves. Her husband Benton followed, sharing stories that painted them as saints who raised perfect children. One of our cousins stood next, recalling a summer vacation where they taught him how to fish. Through it all, I sat there like wallpaper, present but unnoticed. When Uncle Joe stood up with a final toast, my heart jumped a little. Maybe, just maybe, he'd say something, a line, a name, a nod to the fact there was another daughter in the room. He didn't, not one syllable. As the guests clapped, I didn't. It wasn't stubbornness, it was paralysis. The clapping drowned in my ears like I'd fallen underwater. My fingers curled around the stem of my glass until I felt the ridge of the base pressing into my palm. I forced myself to sip the champagne, but it might as well have been air. At the cocktail hour, I drifted toward the exit, but got intercepted by Pamela, one of our distant cousins, who always wore too much floral and called everyone Han. "Oh," she said, startled. "I didn't realize you'd be here. Lorana said you were probably busy back home." That stung more than I cared to admit. "Surprise," I said, with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Across the room, Lorana laughed, surrounded by guests, wine in hand, basking in it. She didn't look at me. She didn't need to. Her message had already arrived in every silence and sidestep, in the absence of a room key, in the absence of a toast, in the absence of even one word of acknowledgement. They hadn't forgotten me. They had erased me, carefully, deliberately, as if I'd never existed at all. The murmur of clinking glass and polite laughter dimmed behind me as I walked out of the main hall and into a quiet corridor that led toward the reception room. I needed space. I needed oxygen. My heels clicked softly against the tile, but inside me, there was a roar that wouldn't quit. I ended up in the lounge area near the back, where a few other guests were sipping coffee and nibbling biscotti. The space had a low hum, just enough distraction to keep my expression neutral, while my mind turned over what had just happened. A projector screen was being set up near the dining area. Someone tapped the microphone and announced that a family slideshow would begin shortly. I returned to my table, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to see it. I needed to know how deep this went. The lights dimmed. The screen glowed to life. A soft, sentimental, instrumental version of What a Wonderful World played over speakers. The first photo was of my parents, young, smiling, standing outside the bungalow where they raised us. The next image was of Lorana, swaddled in baby blankets. Then a sequence of birthdays, vacations, graduations. I watched my sister grow older with every frame. Their lives unfolded like a scrapbook, but I wasn't in it. Not in the Disneyland photo, where I clearly remembered being the one who got sick after the teacup ride. Not in the Christmas picture, where I was the one who'd saved up and bought Mom the snow globe. Not even in the family barbecue shots, where I had stood at the grill every year, while Lorana held court under the patio lights. Someone behind me leaned to whisper, "Didn't they have another daughter?" I felt that like a knife, not because it was cruel, but because it was curious, unaware. The way you ask about a forgotten pet or a misplaced childhood friend, like I had been lost and not purposely removed. I got up, walked out before the slideshow could finish. I didn't need to see any more to know where I stood, or rather, where I didn't. The hallway led to a small balcony overlooking the cliffside. The ocean churned below. The air was sharp, salt-filled. I leaned against the railing and tried to breathe. My fingers trembled around the phone in my hand. It wasn't always like this. I had memories. Real ones. Ones with weight. Like when I was 7, sitting in the garage with my dad. The two of us piecing together a cardboard volcano for the science fair. He let me paint the lava red, even though I spilled half the bottle on his jeans. He laughed and called it authentic. Or when I stayed up all night in college to set up the GoFundMe after their car accident. Lorana was unreachable, on a cruise in Greece. I coordinated the hospital bills, the physical therapy, the in-home nurse. I even opened a temporary trust in Lorana's name, because Mom couldn't sign the documents from her hospital bed. I told myself it was just for a week or two, until things stabilized. Somewhere between then and now, that temporary gesture turned permanent. With a numb sort of clarity, I unlocked my phone and opened my banking app. It took a moment to load, weak signal near the water. But when it did, I saw it. The trust account was still active, still in Lorana's name. My access had been revoked. I stared at the screen, then called the bank hotline, gave them the reference number. The agent on the line confirmed that years ago, the account was legally transferred to Lorana's sole control. A signature was on file. Not mine. I could barely feel my fingertips. The balance had grown. Interest, donations, some matching funds I remembered arranging. It was well over 6 figures. That money was never for Lorana. It was supposed to be a safety net for our parents. I lowered the phone and stared out at the water, lips parted. They used my love as capital, I whispered. Not to anyone in particular, just to the wind, or maybe to the girl I used to be. When I walked back inside, the lights had come up again. The slideshow was finishing. I arrived just in time to catch the final image splashed across the giant screen. A family photo. The words, "Our Legacy," written in gold script across the top. In the image stood Lorana, our parents, Benton and his children from his first marriage, several cousins, and a few neighbors I barely recognized. I wasn't in the photo, not even my name was listed. People clapped like it was some grand finale. Someone dabbed at their eyes with a napkin. Another raised a glass. I stood still. They didn't forget me, I thought. They rewrote me out. And I let them. I let them because I kept telling myself it was temporary, that maybe next time would be different, that I didn't want to cause a scene, that love meant letting things go. But this wasn't forgetfulness. It was precision. It was erasure. That night, I didn't cry. I sat in Sophie's guest room, laptop balanced on my knees, and began gathering everything I had. Screenshots of donations, email receipts, banking statements, notarized forms, old voicemails. Every pixel, every file, every breadcrumb I'd left behind while they built their version of the story without me. I took it back. I wasn't mourning anymore. I was archiving. Once the last document printed and my laptop dimmed itself to sleep, I sat in the quiet of Sophie's guest room and listened, to the tick of the wall clock, to the faint hum of traffic outside. I'd come here with frosting in my hair and hope in my chest. I was leaving with files, receipts, and something sharper than bitterness: clarity. The following evening marked the second half of the celebration. Formal speeches, toasts, and those long-winded anecdotes that only matter to the people who love to hear themselves speak. I arrived in a navy silk dress, hairpinned, face unreadable. Sophie offered to come with me, but I told her no. I needed to do this alone. Inside, the ballroom had changed. Tables were rearranged, lights slightly dimmer, and the wine was flowing faster than yesterday. The air buzzed with practiced elegance. I slid into a corner chair without a word. I didn't need a spotlight to know exactly what I was looking for. Lorana stood up near the podium again, champagne flute lifted high, her smile rehearsed. "We're so thankful to each of you," she said. "This night wouldn't be possible without the generosity and love that built this family. It was all worth it, even if I had to pull from our own savings to make it happen." Applause erupted. A few guests even gave a standing ovation. I didn't move. My hand gripped the base of my wineglass hard enough to leave an imprint. Her savings? That trust wasn't hers. That account existed because I built it from scratch, brick by brick, out of worry, out of love, out of the kind of loyalty that once kept me quiet. And she used it as her own blank check to fund a night that pretended I didn't exist. I didn't flinch, but my jaw locked tight. After the applause settled, I slipped toward the catering corridor, a quiet hallway where servers shuffled in and out, balancing trays and muttering under their breath. Lorana followed soon after, clearly heading toward the restroom. She didn't notice me until I spoke. "Did you just use my money to buy your moment?" She turned, caught off guard for a split second before regaining her composure. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play stupid, Lorana. The trust fund, the one I built for Mom and Dad's care. You took it." She scoffed and rolled her eyes. "Everything's joint in this family, Arlena. Always has been. You act like you're owed something just because you— What? Transferred some paperwork years ago?" I didn't blink. "Not anymore," I said, my voice low and direct. She chuckled, then sipped her champagne with a practiced grace. "What are you going to do, Arlena? Blog about it?" I turned without another word and walked away. But the truth was, I wasn't walking off in defeat. I was walking into position. My silence wasn't surrender, it was alignment. Later that night, as I waited in the valet line, Greg Hensley, an old family friend and retired accountant, tapped my shoulder. "I wasn't sure I should bring this up," he said, voice low, "but I noticed something odd when reviewing some estate docs with your dad last month." I straightened. "What kind of odd?" He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Your name is no longer listed on the Ventura property deed. I remembered it was added in after the refinancing in 2017. But now, it's just under your parents and Lorana." My hands went cold. "I never signed anything." "That's what struck me. I thought maybe you'd removed yourself. But now I'm not so sure. I can send you what I've got, PDFs, timestamps, whatever you need." "Please do," I said. "Email them as soon as you can." As my car pulled up, I slid into the passenger seat, closed the door, and leaned my head back against the leather. The engine hummed, but my thoughts were louder. That house, the one I helped secure, that my name had been on for years, was no longer mine. And I hadn't lifted a pen. By the time I returned to Sophie's guest house, I was done hoping for decency. I powered on my laptop, pulled up the PDFs Greg had just emailed, and began laying out every document I had. Bank transfers, trust authorizations, notarized letters. Page after page of my handwriting, my decisions, my intent, all repackaged by someone else. They weren't just trying to cut me out. They were dressing themselves in everything I'd built, and then acting like I had no place at the table I'd spent decades helping set. I whispered into the stillness. "They want a legacy without me? Then I'll build one they can't erase." I drafted an email, subject line bold. "You have 48 hours to explain this, before it goes beyond just us." I didn't send it, not yet, but it sat there, glowing on the screen like a lit fuse. They'd get one more chance to do the right thing. One. Because if they chose ego over truth again, they wouldn't be answering to me alone. The next morning, the air was thick with a quiet I hadn't felt in years. Not grief, not regret, just space. I stood in Sophie's kitchen, stirring coffee, watching the sun inch its way across the windowsill, when my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a voicemail from my father. "Arlena, your behavior last night was disappointing. This weekend was about us, not you. Not a word about the trust fund, not a breath about the property deed, not even a blink toward Lorana's fraud. That was it. The final push I didn't know I still needed." Sophie glanced up from the paper. "Was that him?" I nodded and set my mug down. "He thinks I embarrassed them." She folded the page, voice quiet. "They'll spin this, you know. Turn it into your fault." I met her gaze with something colder than anger. "Then I'll spin it first." We left not long after. I dressed in a simple slate gray blouse and black pants. I wasn't aiming for elegance anymore. I wanted focus. That day's event was a casual farewell brunch on the hotel's rooftop garden, a send-off for the extended family before they scattered back to Florida, Idaho, Michigan. It was also the only time the microphone was open. No official speeches were planned, just an invitation for memories and reflections. A few cousins joked into the mic. Benton made another rambling toast that landed with a thud. Aunt Pauline told a story about her honeymoon in 1969. And then I stood up. I didn't walk fast. I didn't smile. I just rose, stepped forward, and waited as the room quieted. "I'm Arlena Vexley," I began, my voice firm and even. "Youngest daughter, architect of the Ventura refinance, founder of the emergency medical fund after our parents' accident, absent from your slideshow." Silence wrapped the crowd like a curtain. Someone put down their mimosa a little too hard. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I laid it out clearly. How I'd covered hospital bills during the lapse in their insurance. How I'd organized the fundraiser when no one else stepped up. I mentioned the refinance and the documents I never signed, but somehow disappeared from. I didn't point fingers. I didn't say Lorana's name. I didn't have to. "I used to think being quiet meant being respectful," I said, looking slowly across the room. I now understand silence only helps lies grow louder. Then I stepped down. No grand exit. No stomp. No tears. Just me, sitting back in my chair, sipping from my glass of water like it was any other Tuesday. At first, no one clapped. Then a single set of hands, soft, unsure. Another followed. And then, nothing. No eruption, no applause line. Just stunned silence hanging thick as smoke. My mother stared at her plate. My father looked like he wanted to speak but forgot how. Lorana? Nowhere. She'd vanished before the first word left my mouth. I ate a single grape off the fruit tray in front of me, just to have something to do with my hands. When the brunch finally ended and people began to drift away in clusters of polite confusion, my mother found me by the elevators. Her mouth was tight. Her nails tapped the silver clutch in her hand. "How dare you humiliate us like that?" she hissed. I held her gaze, calm and still. "You're not upset because I lied. You're upset because I told the truth out loud." Her jaw clenched, but I didn't give her room to respond. I leaned in, just enough that she could hear me clearly, but no one else could. "If you keep using my name behind my back," I said softly, "then I'll make sure it's the only name the IRS hears when they come knocking." Her lips parted. Whether it was shock or fear, I didn't wait to find out. I turned and walked toward the elevator as the doors opened. Back in the car, I let out a slow breath and looked out at the Santa Barbara hills. I had said what needed to be said. No yelling, no pleading, just facts. They couldn't ignore me anymore. Not without looking directly into the mirror I just held up. And the next morning, my phone rang again. It was my financial advisor. "Arlena," she said cautiously, "you've got some standing guarantees tied to the family estate. Do you want to revoke all of them?" I didn't pause. Not this time. The silence on the line said enough. "Revoke everything," I told Camille. She didn't respond right away. There was a pause, the kind where you could hear someone leaning back in their office chair, rethinking years of familiarity. "You're absolutely sure, Arlena? Because once this goes through..." "Every signature, every authorization, every bridge I ever helped them build," I cut in. "Burn it down." Camille took a slow breath. "Then I'll get the paperwork started. It'll destabilize the estate. Your name holds weight." "Not anymore," I replied. "Let it fall." I was back in Chicago now. The skies here were duller than Santa Barbara's, but somehow that suited my mood better. No pretense, no glamour, just the facts, laid bare like concrete beneath peeling paint. Later that morning, my inbox filled in like clockwork. First came the flagged activity, an attempt from my father's financial profile to authorize a loan using the Ventura property. Under guarantor, my name was listed. That's when I moved. I opened every shared folder, every joint document, and pulled down every trace I could find. Old PDFs, notarized contracts, trust papers that still bore my maiden signature. I consolidated them into one file, the kind that didn't shout, but roared when opened. Then I sent it out. 3 emails, no fanfare. To their mortgage company, the attached documentation reflects unauthorized use of my legal identity. I do not support or acknowledge the current loan. To the IRS fraud reporting system, flag for potential identity misrepresentation related to the attached estate. And to Lorana, no subject line, just one phrase in the body. I no longer cosign lies. That was all it said. I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't need one. By early afternoon, Camille messaged me back. Confirmed. All guarantees officially revoked as of 1:14 p.m. Central. By 1:30, Benton tried calling. Not his usual number. Probably borrowed someone else's line, thinking I'd pick up. When I didn't, he texted instead. "You'll ruin us. You realize that, right? You'll leave them with nothing." I stared at the screen, thumb hovering for a moment. Then I wrote, "I'm not ruining anything. I'm just letting the truth stand without me holding it up." I hit send. Then I blocked the number. I leaned back in my chair, letting the hum of the radiator fill the space around me. It was strange how quiet this kind of vengeance was. No screaming, no plates thrown. Just a click, a file upload, a legal revocation. Turns out power doesn't have to be loud to be final. That night, I sat with Sophie out on her porch. The fall breeze had turned sharper, but I didn't mind. I wrapped the blanket tighter and pulled my mug of tea close. "You okay?" she asked gently. I thought for a moment. "I'm tired," I admitted, "but I'm not fragile anymore." She nodded. "It took a lot to get here." I looked out at the street, dim under the porch light. Funny how the moment I stopped asking for a seat, I started carving my own table. Sophie smiled, then leaned into her mug. "They don't even realize it yet." "They will," I said. I made sure of that. Right before bed, another message landed in my inbox. This one from Camille. A simple line. "Credit structure collapsed. Property status will reflect within 72 hours. She added, "It might be wise to have legal support in place. They could push back harder now." I didn't hesitate. I replied, "Loop in Harriet. Let's get ahead of it." I shut the laptop and pulled the blanket tighter around me. Outside, a gust of wind rustled the trees. They thought I'd crumble. Instead, I left them a roadmap to their own collapse, and took back every piece of myself they ever tried to claim. 3 days later, a letter arrived. It wasn't from Lorena, not from my mother either. It was from their attorney. And what it said caught me completely off guard. The envelope wasn't thick, but it felt heavier than it should have, like it knew what it carried. I opened it in my office, lights low, coffee cooling beside my hand. I expected threats, legal saber rattling, a demand to retract, to apologize, to fix the damage they claimed I'd caused. Instead, it was an invitation, a request to meet for a confidential family legal discussion regarding estate matters, scheduled at a private law office just outside Santa Barbara. Sophie looked at the letter from across the counter while drying her hands. "That's not a peace offering," she said. "It's a setup." I nodded. "It's bait." "But you're going anyway," she added. Not a question. "Not for them," I said. "For me." It was 2 days later when I walked into the conference room. Cool air, polished wood, a pitcher of lemon water no one touched. My parents were already seated, both dressed like they were attending church and scandal at the same time. Lorana sat to their right, crossed legs and a smug expression tucked behind her red lipstick. Benton hovered behind her, a silent guard dog. There were 2 attorneys, one for them, one neutral, supposedly. Mine was on call, aware, waiting for an update. "Thank you for coming," one of the suited men said, gesturing toward the open seat. I didn't take it. Thurman, my father, leaned forward, tone saccharine. "Arlena, we've been reflecting. This family's gone off course. All we ask is that you reinstate some of your prior agreements. Your financial guarantees meant stability." I smiled. "That's why you waited until the estate cracked to ask," he faltered. My mother looked everywhere but my face. I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope of my own, certified, notarized. "I brought a copy of my will," I said, voice steady. Lorana stiffened. "All of my assets, the condo, the equity shares, the patents I hold from university research, they're no longer tied to the family. Everything goes to Milestone Women's Recovery Shelter now. They never made me prove my worth. They just accepted I had it." My mother's hand went to her pearls, like they could shield her from shame. Benton muttered something under his breath. "What the hell is this, a performance?" he said, too loud for a room with walls that echoed. I turned back to my father. "You hosted a gala using my money and told the world it came from her." I nodded toward Lorana. "And now you're asking for reinstatement?" "We were trying to protect the family legacy," my mother said quickly. I let out a small laugh. Not cruel, just tired. "From what? The truth?" Then came the unexpected break. My father slammed a hand against the table, not with rage, but remorse. "I told her," he said, gesturing to my mother. "I told her playing favorites would destroy us, that letting Lorana run the books, steer the estate, was asking for collapse. But she said Arlena would always be too quiet to fight." The room tilted. Even Lorana blinked. "You didn't stop her either," I said to him. He nodded. "No, I didn't." That crack widened fast. Benton barked, "This is ridiculous. Arlena's always played the martyr. She thrives on it." Lorana scoffed. "You love being the victim. It's your brand now, huh? Self-righteous silence and long stares?" I didn't argue. Instead, I reached into my purse again and placed something small and metallic on the table. A voice recorder, red light blinking faintly. I needed a record, just in case the family truth ever started sounding like fiction. The room froze. My mother's eyes darted toward the attorneys. Thurman dropped his gaze. "You bugged this?" Lorana hissed. "No," I said. "I brought it, and I'm keeping it." I walked out before anyone could answer. Let the implosion happen without me. They'd written the story, but I owned the audio. Sophie was parked at the curb, waiting. I climbed in without a word, pulled the seatbelt across my chest. "How'd it go?" she asked softly. I stared ahead for a moment. Then, "It's not my family anymore. Just some people I share a blood type with." We drove without talking. The sun dipped low behind the hills, washing everything in a golden haze. It should have hurt more than it did, but it didn't. Not anymore. In my bag, I clutched the recorder like a compass. Proof of what had been spoken in the dark. No more silence. No more rewriting me out of history. That night, while I was brushing my teeth, Sophie's phone lit up across the counter. She glanced at it, face suddenly alert. "You need to see this," she said. 3 hours after that meeting, and I hadn't leaked a thing. But someone had. Sophie handed me the phone, and I stared at the screen. It was a video, low quality, but unmistakably real. My voice, my words, my family's crumbling silence in the background. Someone had recorded the estate meeting, and someone had leaked it. The group chat bubbles at the bottom read like nervous whispers. "Did you see what Arlena said? Is that her dad admitting it? Wow, just wow!" The clip was already circling among old neighbors, family acquaintances, even a few former coworkers who still followed me out of polite curiosity. I didn't feel exposed. I felt seen. By mid-morning, my inbox was flooded, some with apologies, a few with veiled judgment, most with stunned silence. But none of it changed my plan. I had one final appearance to make. The last brunch event was set at a vineyard just outside town. I drove myself this time. No Sophie, no shield. Just me and the weight of truth already scattered across a dozen inboxes. The air was light, a breeze rolling off the hills like a curtain lifting. Champagne glasses clinked, laughter buzzed low, and the string quartet played something delicate and forgettable. I parked, got out, adjusted my coat, and walked in. No one stopped me, until Lorraine, my cousin, intercepted me near the reception table. "You really think this is the place to show your face after that?" she whispered. I looked her squarely in the eyes and said, "I'm not here to be seen, I'm here to be finished." I passed her without breaking stride. Inside, people paused when they saw me. Forks froze midair. A few tried to smile, performative warmth, like thin napkins in a downpour. I didn't return them. Lorana stood at the far end, stiff as ever, surrounded by a smaller cluster than usual. Her laugh, always a little too loud, had dimmed to something hollow. I walked to the buffet, poured myself half a glass of champagne, and turned to face the room. No microphone, no stage, just my voice. I know I wasn't invited to toast today, but I'll make it quick. People shifted, unsure whether to sit taller or sink lower. I want to raise this glass, not to the past, not to what was polished to look better than it ever felt. I want to toast what's real, starting over. Not when you're young and eager, but when you're older, smarter, and finally willing to stop apologizing for existing. I took a slow sip, my eyes scanning faces I'd once called home. To those who expected nothing from me, thank you. It made finding my worth so much clearer. I crossed the room and stopped by my mother's chair. She looked up, lips tight, hands folded. "I left you something," I said, placing a folded letter beside her plate. "It's the last thing I'll ever ask you to read." Then I turned and left. The wind outside caught the edge of my coat like an old friend tugging me forward. In the parking lot, I handed the valet a ticket, and he brought my car with a quick nod. Sophie was already inside, arms folded, waiting. "Well?" "It's done," I said as I closed the door and pulled the seatbelt across my lap. As we drove away, I glanced in the mirror. Behind us, a ripple spread across the tables like water disturbed. My name wouldn't be whispered in admiration, but it would be remembered. The letter? Nothing theatrical. It simply read, "This isn't about the money. This is about the memory. And mine matters too." Attached were 10 pages of bank records, signed transfers, dated donations. The cover sheet titled, "Donations You Never Remembered." My father would read it, my mother probably wouldn't. But that didn't matter anymore. It wasn't for them. It was for me. Back in the car, Sophie asked gently, "You sure this is it?" I nodded. "They erased me for years. This was the last time I handed them a pen." An hour later, we pulled up to a lake cabin I had booked weeks ago, just in case. I thought I might cancel it, that I'd be too emotionally spent to want isolation. But the second I stepped inside, I knew it was exactly where I needed to be. The space was small but warm. Wood paneling, stone fireplace, a view of the water that shimmered even in stillness. I lit a candle, brewed tea, and set my suitcase by the bed. Then I opened the duffel bag that had followed me through every mile of this mess, through the rain, the silence, the confrontations. Inside were the letters I'd kept, and the photos I'd hidden, the journal I hadn't opened in 4 years. I spread them out across the bed, like pieces of a map I was finally willing to read. Some I threw away, some I framed. Then I picked up my pen and opened to the first blank page of the journal. I didn't write a novel. I didn't even use a paragraph. Just one sentence. My story isn't theirs to erase. And I meant every word. The knock came just after sunrise. 3 short taps. Hesitant but familiar, like someone unsure if they were still welcome. I set down my coffee mug, the steam curling up between my fingers, and moved to the door without rushing. Part of me already knew who it was. I opened it. My father stood there, hands in the pockets of his jacket, the same kind he wore to mow the lawn when I was a child. His shoulders were hunched, like the weight of everything he'd ignored had finally settled in. "I just needed to see you," he said, not looking me fully in the eye. "To know you're all right." I didn't invite him in, but I stepped aside just enough so he could see I wasn't alone, or broken, or lost. "I'm fine," I said. There was a long pause. No excuses, no apologies, just breath between us and the sound of birds waking the trees. "You didn't deserve the silence," he finally muttered, his voice thick with things he wasn't ready to say. "We gave you too much of it." I nodded once, not with forgiveness, but with understanding. That was as much as I could offer. We stood by the lake in silence. It wasn't a moment of reconciliation. It wasn't some sweeping reunion. It was 2 people sharing space again, awkward, fragile, real. Then he left. No dramatic goodbye, no plea to return, just a quiet walk back to his car and a glance in the rearview mirror that lasted longer than it should have. Later that week, news traveled fast. The family trust had been flagged. Lorraine and Benton were under financial audit, their business credit lines frozen. I didn't take pleasure in it, but I didn't stop it either. One morning, a thick envelope arrived at my Hudson Valley mailbox. The logo on the top left corner. Milestone Women's Recovery Shelter. Inside was a handwritten note from the director. Arlena, your commitment will help us open a second transitional housing unit next year. I hope you know what this means to us. Attached were photos, smiling women in sunlit rooms, a list of needs being met, a sentence that brought a lump to my throat. You gave us more than money. You gave us dignity. I sat with that letter on my lap for a long while. That night, I opened a new tab on my laptop, hit record, and spoke into the microphone. This is Daughters Who Left the Table, a podcast for women who stopped waiting for a seat and started building their own. Episode 1 began with my voice, steady, calm, no script. Sometimes the people who raise you are the first to teach you how invisible you're allowed to be. But here, you're heard. Recording those first words felt like stitching together a tear that had lived in my chest for years. 2 weeks later, Sophie and I packed a small overnight bag and drove upstate. We checked into a retreat center nestled in the hills, surrounded by pine and silence. The air was clean, the kind that filled your lungs like hope. Over dinner, with fresh bread still warm from the oven and wine that tasted like summer, Sophie tilted her head and studied me. You look like someone who made it back from war, she said. Not untouched, but stronger. I smiled softly. Not all wars leave bruises you can see. We spent the next morning walking the gardens, sipping coffee, letting the quiet do its work. Before we left, we planted a tree together on the property, a small redbud. I named it Hope. That afternoon, in the shade of the retreat's front porch, I wrote a letter I'd never send. Mom, if you ever decide to speak to me again, I hope it's not to edit the past or deny what happened. I hope it's to tell the truth, out loud, without conditions. Until then, I'll keep living mine. I folded the paper and placed it inside my journal. Not a bridge, just a seed. Some things don't need to grow right away. Some never will. Months passed gently after that. When the anniversary of my parents' wedding came around again, I woke early, not to drive, not to call, but to bake, not carrot cake. That belonged to a different time. I made a small lavender and lemon cake. Light, subtle, something new. I set the table out back, under the tree behind my place. Invited 3 women from the shelter who had no family nearby. One of them brought her teenage daughter. Another brought a poem. As we sipped tea and passed plates, one of them looked at me and asked, "So what's this cake called?" I paused, smiled. The beginning. And that's how it felt. Like life starting not over, but forward. Not a restoration, a rebirth. No speeches, no camera, no post for the world to clap for. Just the quiet sound of laughter, of shared bread, of hands brushing crumbs from a wooden table. And as the sun slid behind the trees, catching the edge of the plates and casting soft shadows, I sat back and realized, some journeys don't take you back home. They carry you toward the home you were meant to build. Before I go, I want to leave you with this. If there's one thing this journey taught me, it's this. Silence may keep the peace, but it also keeps the pain alive. For years, I thought loyalty meant staying quiet, swallowing every slight just to keep my place in a family that had no room for me. But the truth? Real love doesn't erase you. Real families don't ask you to shrink so others can shine. I used to believe that starting over had an expiration date, that if you hadn't rebuilt by 40 it was too late. But here I am, at 43, planting the first seeds of a life that finally belongs to me. So if you're watching this and you've ever felt forgotten, invisible, or erased, I see you, and I hope this story reminds you. Your voice matters, your story counts, and it is never too late to reclaim your name, your space, or your peace. Let me ask you this. Have you ever walked away from something that once felt like everything? What did it teach you about who you are? I'd love to hear your story. Share it in the comments, even just a sentence. Sometimes that's all it takes to let healing begin. If this story touched your heart or gave you strength, type 1 in the comments, or tell me what city you're watching from. And if you didn't connect with this one, that's okay too. Let me know why and where you're tuning in from. I'm listening. And if you'd like to hear more stories that feel real, raw, and human, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. There's more on the way, and I'd love for you to walk with me through them. Until next time, be kind to yourself, and don't be afraid to walk away if the table was never set for you to begin with.